We are continuing in the book of Acts, really the last part of Acts majored and went from the apostles to the apostle Paul, the apostle of the Gentiles. And so we're getting close to the end of him making it finally to Rome, which was his heart's desire. Acts 28, 1 through 10, waiting 3 months on the island of Malta. 28, 1 through 10. And when they were escaped, then they knew that the island was called Melita, or Malta, and the barbarous people shewed us no little kindness, for they kindled a fire, and received us every one because of the present rain and because of the cold. And when Paul had gathered a bundle of sticks and laid them on the fire, there came a viper out of the heat, and fastened on his hand. And when the barbarians saw the venomous beast hanging on his hand, they said among themselves, no doubt, this man is a murderer. And though he hath escaped the sea, yet vengeance suffereth not to live. And he shook off the beast in the fire, and felt no harm. Howbeit, they looked when he should have swollen, or fallen down dead suddenly. But after they had looked a great while and saw no harm come to him, they changed their minds and said that he was a god. In the same quarters were possessions of the chief man of the island, whose name was Publius, who received us and lodged us 3 days courteously. And it came to pass that the father of Publius lay sick of a fever and of a bloody flux, to whom Paul entered in and prayed and laid his hands on him and healed him. So when this was done, others also which had diseases in the island came and were healed, who also honored us with many honors. And when we departed, they laded us with such things as were necessary. Waiting 3 months on the island of Malta, we have 3 divisions: safety, verses 1 and 2, snake, verses 3 through 6, and service or ministry, verses 7 through 10. And get us in context. So Paul in a ship headed for Rome, but made his appeal to Caesar. It was really, I believe it was Crete where they got to. Anyway, they got to the place, and the safe time for sailing was over. Paul gave advice, don't go, but they did. And an awful, terrible storm happened. And on the 14th day, in a storm on the sea in a boat, I believe it says at midnight, they approached land, probably hearing the breakers, hear the shore, and they did, however, the method they had of finding the depth. And it was getting more shallow, so they cast their anchors because they couldn't see at midnight. And they were waiting and wishing for day. And then Paul gave advice for them to eat because they hadn't eaten for 14 days. Eat, and they did, and they were filled. And they dumped the rest of their cargo, wheat. And they came and they saw a creek with a shore, and they thought, this looks like a good place. And they headed for it, but unbeknownst to them, there was a sandbar or something in there they did not see. They hit that thing. The front of the ship was stuck and would not move, but the back ship was not. And it was hit by the waves on both sides and began to break in pieces. The Roman soldiers, being responsible for their prisoners, Paul and others wanted to kill the prisoners. So they went and had to forfeit their own lives, lest they escape. The centurion, over hundreds, put that to a halt, hindered that idea. And he said, everyone who can swim, you jump in first and make the shore. And they did. And everyone else looked for boards or pieces of the broken up ship and grabbed him and make the shore. And they did. And all 276 people made it safely ashore, which was exactly what had happened. God gave that promise to Paul from an angel. Every one of them made it. So, number one, safety in verses 1 and 2. And when they were escaped, the word escaped, compound word of the normal word to be saved. It means to be rescued completely. Every one of them made it to shore. They were rescued completely. They made it to safety. And then when they got there, they knew that the island was called Malta. The island was Malta. It was inhabited by those who were of Phoenician descent. Phoenicians were known for seafarers. And Malta is a Canaan word. It means, I believe it means refuge. And so that island had been a refuge, no doubt, for the seafaring Phoenicians for years, kind of a nickname. And so now they knew where they were. The verse 2, it's still raining, it is cold. It's probably either late October, November. It's raining, it's cold. They made it to shore, they're all wet, they're miserable, they're cold. And the barbarous people were good to them. Showed us or demonstrated to us no little kindness. Now, barbarians does not mean here what it means to us. We think of barbarian, we think of someone who's uncivilized and fierce. The word barbarian means those who do not speak Greek. It was a language thing. These were Phoenicians. Phoenician descent, they spoke a Phoenician dialect. They didn't speak Greek. And they were all barbarians, and the word just simply means they didn't speak Greek. They were very good. So, here, and these are strangers, 276 strangers. Their ship is wrecked and been torn to smithereens. And they made the shore, and they're probably, shivering in the cold rain. And the natives, they build a fire. And so these people can be warmed. Well, that's a very good thing to do. That's unusual. But that is exactly what they did. Now we see a snake. I think here we see not only the literal snake, the viper, we also see the spiritual snake, the devil, trying to kill Paul. Oh, verse 3 through 6, the snake. And so, Paul's not too good to work. He is the apostle to the Gentiles, but on many of his missionary journeys, he will be bivocational. He will make tents to pay his way, buy his food, and minister when he can. So here he is. Well, here's a fire. There's some sticks. That fire feels good. I don't want it to go out. So go and gather sticks. And the word for gather means to twist together or roll in a bundle. I picture Paul going there, see a bunch of sticks and gathering them all up together, going and throw them in the fire. Ooh, this fire feels good. But there was a viper maybe in that bundle of sticks. And with it cold, snakes get lethargic when it's cold. But fire and a heat warmed it up. That sucker came out and fastened on Paul's hand and wasn't going to let go. Not a good thing to happen. Not what you would want to happen. So verse 4, when the barbarians, again, the natives, non-Greek speaking people, when they saw this viper hanging on Paul's hand, so They all said among them, okay, so this man obviously is a murderer. And, he survived a shipwreck. And obviously they knew there had been a storm for many days in that area, I'm sure. And, he survived the shipwreck, the storm, but because he's a bad guy and escaped the sea, yet vengeance will not allow him to live. Vengeance is the word justice in Greek, and probably personified. I believe it was A.T. Robertson said that as far as he knew, the Phoenicians on that island did not have a god or goddess named Justice that they worshiped. This is probably just a personification of justice. No, we do that today. So, how do we personify death? The Grim Reaper with that scythe. Remember that old commercial of Mother Nature? It's not nice to fool Mother Nature. Personifying something that is not real. And probably they're personifying justice here. Well, now, Paul thinks he's paid it, but he's a bad dude, he's probably a murderer, and now justice is going to give Paul his due. And he's not going to make it. So, further on to verse 5, Paul just gets his arm and just throws that viper into the fire. And did not hurt one bit. I think that verse passage in Luke, and you will tread on serpents and scorpions, and the power of the enemy will not harm you. Certainly we see that here. But the natives, they looked, and the word for look has the idea they were waiting and expecting. I'm sure they didn't have chairs. They didn't have popcorn, We say today, gather up some chairs, get you some popcorn. We're going to sit here and we're going to watch this guy die. That was the idea. They were watching and they were waiting and they were expecting him to swell up where he got bit. That is the medical term for inflammation. Thinking his arm's going to swell from the poison, or that all of a sudden he's just going to fall down dead. Because that poison going to go all through his body, and he's going to die. We're going to sit here and we're going to wait and watch until he dies. You know what that reminds me of? Jonah. Jonah preaches in Nineveh. He hates the Assyrian people. And he preaches that God's going to bring judgment on them because they are sinners, and they were. But they repented, and God forgave them their sins. He didn't destroy the city. But Jonah wanted them to perish, and he got on a hill outside the city and was waiting to see what would happen. Jonah wanted to see God destroy them. Now, I believe these people, they want to see Paul die from that snake bite. They were just waiting and watching. And so time passes, and he doesn't show any ill effects at all. He's fine. And then they change their minds and say, oh, this guy, he must be a god. So obviously they were very superstitious. Reminds me, in one of the, I believe it was Paul and Barnabas, was on the first missionary journey. They went to a place, did miracles, and the natives thought they were gods. I think they called one the head god, and the other one they called the messenger god. And of course, Paul and Barnabas, no, we're not gods, we're men just like you. And then what did they do? They got Paul and they took him and stoned him to the point of death where they thought he was dead. Well, people can change their minds in a hurry. So these people went from thinking that Paul was a criminal being justly punished to a god. Obviously, he wasn't. So now we go to service, verses 7 through 10, service or ministry. Now that's in the same quarters that is in that same part of that island. There were possessions, and the word really means land or property, of the chief man of the island. Literally, that is the first man of the island. And that phrase, first man of the island, was found in two Maltese inscriptions, one in Latin and one in Greek. So that was probably the official title of the guy over the island, the first man of the island. By the way, the island of Malta is about 100 miles south of Sicily. In those days, it would be part of the Roman province of Sicily. His name was Publius, so he received us and lodged us or entertained us for 3 days courteously. And then that's showing kindness. You know, here are people that are strangers, and this man is taking care of them for 3 days. But at verse 8, his father of the first man of the island, he was sick of fever, literally it is fevers, and of a bloody flux. The reason why it's probably plural, because this was something that probably was intermittent, that he would have fever from time to time. A bloody flux. The Greek word really is literally dysentery. Well, that's where we get the English word dysentery from, this word here. I've heard of it all my life, didn't know what it meant. I got, looked it up online. And what is dysentery? It is a gastrointestinal infection that causes extreme diarrhea with blood. So bloody flux was probably pretty accurate. Now, what is really interesting, there is a sickness in the island of Malta. It's called Malta fever, and it's caused by a microbe in goat's milk. And if you get this Malta fever, you are sick usually about 4 months. But it can last up to 2 to 3 years. Imagine that, being sick with that for 2 to 3 years. So, Publius' father was sick with dysentery or this Malta fever. Paul entered in and he prayed. Then he laid his hands on him and he healed him. Now we see Paul doing kindness and ministry and service. So, what do you think happened next? Word got out, no doubt. Word got out. Everybody, man, hey man, their leader's dad has been sick, and now he's well. It was that stranger that got bit by the snake. He did it. He healed it. He healed Publius' father. Word gets out, so others who had diseases on the island came and were healed. Now, again, this is interesting. The word for healed in verse 8, normal word for healed. The word for verse 9 is the verb form of where we get the word therapy from. And the word really means, it can be translated as healed. Sometimes it's used that way. But it can be translated to be medically treated. So who was with Paul? Luke. Who was Luke? He was a doctor. And so people on the island were sick, and they were brought to Paul and Luke. And I think Paul healed some, and I think Luke treated him with medicine, the ones that could be treated with medicine, and they were treated and healed. The reason why I think Luke also did medicine, because verse 10, Luke, us, who also, the people of the island, they honored us, not just Paul, but they honored us with many honors. And And the word there for honors could be translated as gifts. And so Paul and Luke, they tell people, and people are giving them gifts. You know, today we still have that practice, you know, of somebody coming and we giving them an honorarium. That's the same idea. And so Paul and Luke ministered and they were giving gifts. And then after being there 3 months, we see that the next verse, it was for 3 months. And when Paul and Luke, of course, the Roman centurion and the soldiers, the others, when they left, these people loaded them up with goods, supplies. They got out of the ocean, all they had were the clothes on their backs. They didn't have anything. And these people, when they left, they gave them the supplies that they needed. Now, we're not told this, and I think we can read between the lines and no doubt think that Paul and Luke preached the gospel while they were on the island of Malta. No doubt they did. So, 3 lessons. Lesson number 1, we see opposition. Opposition from the devil. And having that snake, that poisonous snake viper. By the way, I just say this, that one of the words for viper translated beast literally is little beast, but it is a medical term for poisonous serpents. So when you live for God, the devil, fallen angels, demonic forces, they will work against you. And how many times did Paul have brushes with death? Many. Here's another one. Bit by a poisonous snake, but survived. If God has laid out his will in your life, you know what it is you're trying to do, and you will have opposition from the devil, but God will help you through that opposition. Don't quit. Don't give up. Keep on doing what God's will is that is laid out for you. If you don't know what it is, get on your knees and ask God to reveal his will to you. Number 2, we see deliverance. All 276 men on that ship, maybe there's some women, I don't know. All 276 people survived. God delivered them. Paul was delivered from being by a poisonous snake. And the father of Publius was delivered from his sickness. God used Paul to heal him, and then others on the island were helped, probably by Paul and Luke. Thirdly, we see kindness, service, ministry. The natives of the island immediately building a fire to warm those who had just come out of the cold water while it was raining. Publius hosting Paul and Luke for 3 days. And then Paul and Luke doing the ministry of healing, and Luke medical treatment. Kindness, ministry, service. We need to be involved in doing God's work. And Paul did all of this because Jesus saved him. He wanted to bring as many people with him into the kingdom of God and deliver them from the powers and the deceit of the devil, so they would not die without Jesus in their sins and be cast in the lake of fire to be tormented forever and ever. And so Jesus died for you that you could have eternal life. And if you've not made the decision of confessing your sins and committing to Jesus as Lord, do that today. And may we, his children, be busy in spreading the good word that Jesus indeed saves. May God bless you in your faithfulness. Bo Ivy, would you close us in prayer?
Really, Father.